All right, so my daughter went back to school today. I think we're both ready for it. She's only there for a couple of hours, and it's strange, you know. She has to wear a mask, and we have this sort of shortened hours, smaller classrooms, things like that. But anyway, back to school, so I have a little more time. She gets to be around people. I think it'll be good as long as it lasts. Now, that said, I wanted to do a little back to school themed video about some of the paintings that I've made. Now, these are very different than the story I just told. These are Black girls, and they had to overcome quite a lot to make a difference in the public school system for us. These are things we take for granted now, but all my paintings, every story that I learn gives me perspective of my own life. So hopefully you'll get some of that too. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about Ruby Bridges, who you probably know because she's so well known. Bit of a poster child for desegregation in the schools. I learned about her when I was little, so I assume other people do too, or did. And then Dorothy Counts, who I learned about more recently, and she was a high school student. So I'm going to start with her. So in 1954, is that the year? Yeah, 1954, the government decided that desegregation in public schools was unconstitutional. And so most schools began to integrate Black and white students. But in some certain places, they resisted for quite a while. So 3 years later, in 1957, Dorothy Counts, she was in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, and she was chosen to be the first Black school student to go to school in this all-white high school. So at 15 years old, she showed up in her cute little dress with her ribbon. I don't know if I got the colors right, but anyway. This is from a photo with boys jeering at her in the background, and I did paint them kind of loosely like that because I wanted to, I don't know, for me it felt like the spirit of bullying, how the voices sort of stay around you for a long time and can affect your life for a long time. I don't know what she went through, but even the small bits of bullying that I had in my life stayed with me for decades. So I can only imagine what she went through. But anyway, here's a picture from that day. There were several pictures, like the one I took that from, but also here's another. And they really, once they were published, really shocked the nation, at least the places where schools were integrated. And I mean, look at just what he's doing. It's just, look at the glee in those boys' those faces. It's pretty sad. It's awful. But anyway, I love seeing it because it just shows the sort of human condition that we keep, you know, pushing back by being mean to these victims. And Dorothy only made it 4 days at that high school before her father took her out for fearing for her life. So, but she did go on to, in her life that day, and those days really affected her, and she became an advocate for civil rights. She's still interviewed to this day. She's in her 80s now, and what she said, I'm going to read her quote that I wrote down. Sorry, I'm not very organized about these things. What happened that day really set me on a path. I've always wanted to work to make sure that bad things don't happen to other children. So she used that experience to, you know, really change things and work towards goodness. And she still does to this day. And then we have, I'm losing my page here, little Ruby Bridges. Now she was only 6 years old, and this was 3 years later in 1960, and she was in a school in Alabama. But she's the one that really caught the public's imagination because people couldn't believe that the schools still weren't integrated. Other states. We are a country somehow of all these different states, and what happens in one state affects us all. And so little Ruby, I just, even looking at her, I get quite emotional because of the light in her eyes. And that is not just what I painted, it's what she had in her pictures. You can just look at them. There was just such a fresh-faced hope. And when she went to school, all the parents in her class took their children out of school. So she was alone. There was no one with her that day or for the rest of the year. Mrs. Henry was her teacher that year, and she sat with her through lunch. She sat with her through recess. And she helped her work out her emotions during that time. And she showed up every single day. And I believe her mother also had a large part of that. She really truly believed that Ruby was sort of chosen to do this and smart enough, and that this would give her the opportunities that her daughter deserved. And in the end, she got them, because she got through that year. Every day she showed up, and there were horrible protest signs just talking about how she wasn't, God's child, and she wasn't, how this was communism to mix black and white children at the time, which is crazy because we still hear those sort of arguments today. Norman Rockwell did a very famous painting called "The Problem We Live With" at that time, and she had to be walked to school with these a security team basically of men, and she just sat with her teacher every day. So that's Ruby Bridges, and she also went on to be an advocate for civil rights, and I wrote a quote for her. What she learned in that experience is that kids know nothing about racism. They're taught that by adults. So, happy back to school.